What if I told you that one of the most ruthless and honestly, one of the most effective guides to leadership ever written wasn't cooked up in some modern business school, but was actually written over 2,300 years ago? Well, let's dive into the world of Kautilya and his masterpiece, the Arthashastra. This isn't just some dusty old book. It's a timeless and pretty intense blueprint for how to get and keep power.
Everything, and I mean everything, Kautilya writes is designed to solve one single terrifying problem. He calls it the proverb of fishes. Just picture it. In the water, the big fish just eats the little fish. No rules, no justice, just raw power. That's anarchy. And for Kautilya, the entire purpose of a king, the entire point of government, is to prevent that world from ever becoming a reality.
So how do you stop the big fish from eating the small fish? How do you build a state that's stable and strong? Well, for Kautilya, it all starts with one thing: knowledge. Before you can even think about ruling other people, you first have to rule your own mind. You've got to educate yourself in the essential sciences of power.
Now you have to understand, back in Kautilya's day, this was a huge debate. All these different schools of thought were arguing about what a leader really needed to know. You had the school of Manu saying, nope, there are only 3 essential sciences. Then the school of Brihaspati comes along and says, actually, you only need 2. Everybody had their own theory on the perfect curriculum for a king.
And then Kautilya steps onto the scene, and he just cuts right through all that noise. He basically says, you're all wrong. There are 4 and only 4 sciences that a ruler absolutely must master to be effective. No more, no less. This was his final, definitive answer. And here they are. First up, philosophy and logic, so you can think clearly and keep your mind steady under pressure. Second, the Vedas, the sacred texts, because you have to understand what is right and what your duty is. Third, economics, because let's be real, a state without money is a state that's going to collapse. And finally, number 4, Danda-Niti, which is the science of government itself, the practical knowledge of how to rule. For Kautilya, these 4 things together created the complete intellectual toolkit for a leader.
But Kautilya's training program doesn't stop with book smarts, not even close. He argues that all the knowledge in the world is completely useless if the ruler is a slave to their own impulses. So the next critical step is to conquer yourself. And he introduces this absolutely brilliant concept, the aggregate of the 6 enemies. Now, these aren't opposing armies or rival kingdoms. No, these enemies are much more dangerous. They're the fatal flaws that live inside every single one of us, just waiting for a moment of weakness to tear everything down from the inside. So what are they? Well, here's the list: lust, anger, greed, vanity, haughtiness, and get this, even overjoy. Yep, you heard that right. Kautilya saw being excessively happy or carried away by success as a massive vulnerability. He believed that giving in to any one of these could cost a ruler not just their kingdom, but probably their life too. And he's not being dramatic here. It doesn't matter if you rule the entire world. Kautilya points to actual examples of legendary kings who were destroyed by these very flaws, like Ravana, who fell because of his vanity. The message couldn't be clearer. If you can't control yourself, you can't control anything. Okay, so you've sharpened your mind and you've conquered your inner demons. Now what? You can't rule the whole kingdom by yourself. The next step is one of the toughest challenges any leader will ever face: building an inner circle you can actually trust. I mean, really think about that. It's the timeless question, isn't it? When the stakes are literally life and death, how do you possibly choose the people who will give you advice, who will handle the state's money, who will know all your secrets? And just like with the sciences, everyone back then had a theory. One guy said, oh, hire your old school buddies. Another suggested you should only hire people whose families have served your family for generations. And Kautilya? He just dismissed all of it. He argued that hiring your friends just leads to them disrespecting you, and relying on family alone just invites incompetence.
So Kautilya came up with his own exhaustive list of qualifications. He wanted the whole package. But the thing that's truly revolutionary is that very last point. After checking all these other boxes, the final, most important test was simple. Can they actually do the job? As he put it, a person's ability is proven by the work they do. He was basically arguing for a pure meritocracy, which was a wild idea for the time.
So that brings us to a really tricky problem. Okay, you can test if someone is a good accountant or a good general, but how in the world do you test for qualities like loyalty or honesty or courage? This is where Kautilya's genius gets, well, It gets pretty dark and incredibly clever. He came up with these 4 secret tests, these 4 brutal temptations. His spies would approach a potential minister and basically try to corrupt them. They'd use religion, pretending to be a holy man who wants to overthrow the unrighteous king. They'd use money, offering a massive bribe to join a conspiracy. They'd use lust, and they'd use fear. Only the people who resisted every single one of these temptations were considered pure enough for the most powerful jobs.
So you've got your loyal, tested inner circle. You're set, right? Wrong. How do you know what's really going on out there in the kingdom, beyond the palace walls? You need information. And for Kautilya, that meant building one of the most sophisticated and extensive spy networks the world had ever seen.
A ruler can't be everywhere at once. And worse, they're constantly surrounded by people who are paid to tell them what they want to hear. To really be in control, a king needs a source of unfiltered, raw intelligence. They need to know what people are truly thinking and saying when they believe no one is listening. And just look at the sheer creativity of his system. Kautilya recommended recruiting spies from literally every single walk of life. Fake students, failed merchants, desperate criminals, and even holy women who could get invited into the homes of high-ranking officials. In Kautilya's kingdom, nobody was above suspicion, and almost anybody could be an informant. But Kautilya wasn't a fool. He knew that spies could lie, they could be wrong, they could have their own agendas. So he built in a critical failsafe. A piece of information was only considered reliable if it was independently confirmed by 3 separate, unconnected sources. It's an ancient system of fact-checking. So let's recap. We have the knowledge, the self-discipline, the elite team, and the vast intelligence network. How does this all come together in practice? Well, it comes together in a daily routine of relentless, soul-crushing work. For Kautilya, the king is the battery that powers the entire state. There's absolutely no room for laziness or taking a day off. A ruler's personal energy, their drive, sets the pace for the whole kingdom. So they must always be active, always be vigilant, and, as he says, ever be wakeful.
And this schedule is it's brutal. Waking up at 1:30 in the morning to meditate on political science. Consulting with his counsel and sending out spies at 3 a.m., before the sun is even up. Hearing petitions from ordinary citizens, reviewing the budget, planning military campaigns, every single 90-minute block of the day and night is scheduled. There is no downtime, there is only duty.
So after all of this, the ruthlessness, the spies, the temptations, the insane discipline, you have to wonder, what is it all for? And this is where Kautilya delivers the final crucial point. The king does all this not for his own glory or wealth. The entire purpose of this massive system of control is to create a state that is stable, secure, and prosperous for its people. The king's personal happiness is totally irrelevant. Only the welfare of his subjects matters. And that really leaves us with the central puzzle of the Arthashastra. Is it just a dark, cynical handbook for becoming an all-powerful tyrant who's obsessed with control? Or is it a practical, if incredibly harsh, guide to achieving what all good leaders claim to want, a safe and prosperous society, one that's finally free from that terrifying proverb of fishes? That's something